Hey guys and girls, how's it going? Hope you guys having a great week. So we are back today with our next episode of the Normandy News Feed. This is your one-stop shop for all things gaming news related. We're going to jump off and kick off today and talk about some of the biggest news that came out in the last 2 weeks. Let's go.
Welcome to Citadel Newsnet. I'm Emily Wong.
So the first thing I want to talk about is the Bioware, the news related to Bioware in the last 2 weeks, specifically related to layoffs at Bioware. So it started off with a blog post on Bioware's website by General Manager Gary McKay, that was talking about some restructuring at Bioware and that they're kind of becoming a more agile studio, smaller studio to focus on the next Mass Effect. So I'm just going to read you a couple of snippets, not all of it, just a couple of snippets out of that blog post, and then we'll talk about more information that dropped as the week went on, because there was a lot in this blog post that was really unsaid, that really should have been identified. And in my opinion, EA and BioWare took the cowardly way out, because the way in which they did this was just disgusting, in my opinion. So
they like using that agile word,
yeah,
don't they?
it's corporate speak for we're downsizing. Basically, that's what it is. It's corporate speak for downsizing. Basically, it's corporate speak for layoffs. That's effectively what it is. So he said that he did confirm, obviously, to reassure, obviously, after, I guess, the disappointment that was Dragon Age the Veilguard. We talked about this in our last news feed, obviously, that Veilguard didn't perform to what EA had been hoping for. They predicted about 3 million sales, 3 million players engaging with the game, and about 1.5 million players engaged with the game. So that's not sales. And that obviously was a massive disappointment for them. But they did reassure fans that they are focused down on the next title, which is obviously the next Mass Effect. And BioWare have basically now become a one project studio, which is insane, because it means that it's all or nothing for me on the next game. They are now, in my opinion, they've now had the last 3 entries, I suppose, have been disappointments. Right? Dragon Age Inquisition, well, there were some things that people didn't like. Commercially, it was a massive success. It sold 12 million copies in its lifetime. It was a huge success. It was the biggest selling Dragon Age title. It did really, really well. Andromeda didn't do too bad either, I don't think. But obviously there was a lot of criticism for Andromeda. And then obviously Anthem was an absolute debacle, the worst game in BioWare's history. And then obviously Dragon Age Veilguard, well, it has had some good critic reviews. The response from the fans has generally been a bit mixed, with some people liking it and some people absolutely hating it. It's the Marmite of the Dragon Age franchise, effectively, from the looks of it. But he did confirm that they are working down on the next Mass Effect, and I'm quoting here, a core team at BioWare is developing the next Mass Effect game under the leadership of veterans from the original trilogy, including Mike Gamble, Preston Watanauk, apologize if I butchered that, Derek Watts, Parish Lay, and others. He then carried on to say, given this stage of development, we don't require support from the full studio. We have incredible talent here at BioWare, and so we have worked diligently over the past few months to match many of our colleagues with other teams at EA that had open roles that were a strong fit. So, yes. So that blog post implies that, people were not laid off and that they just moved these people onto other projects, right, within EA. Mm-hmm. We talked a little bit about Mark Darrah's video, in the last time, which is really good. You should watch it because it's quite insightful. And he talked about the fact that this was going to happen, that usually in previous years, BioWare has always been a multi-project studio. So there's always something for people to work on, whether it was working on DLC before the next big project spins up, or working on Star Wars, as well as Dragon Age and Mass Effect all at the same time. So, but now BioWare have become a lot more just putting their eggs into one basket effectively, which is a one project studio. And obviously the game isn't at the point that it needs a full development team. So he was talking about people are going to move on to other projects, and that how that could cause issues, most definitely. But this blog post is incredibly misleading for me. It's incredibly misleading, and a lot came out a few days, a week or so after this blog post was released, where a lot of I suppose ex-employees, a lot of people that were on the Dragon Age team, it looks like it's pretty much the Dragon Age team that have been let go or downsized, but we've got a lot of key veterans that have also worked on Mass Effect, a lot of key lead writers that have gone, and we're talking people that have done, yes, okay, the writing of Veilguard wasn't great, I 100% think it was awful, and the dialogue was terrible, and I definitely do think that you know, the writers should be held accountable for that. It's a performance-based studio industry. If you suck at your job, there should certainly be like consequences. But I'm a little sad because it means that they're not going to be able to redeem themselves, you know what I mean, in the next Mass Effect. And a lot of these writers have written some incredible things, like obviously Mary Kirby, who was the main writer for Varric. She left in 2023 before Veilguard was released. We've had confirmed Trick Weeks and Karen Weeks, two long-time Bioware veterans, have also confirmed that they've been let go. They did this on Blue Sky, not on X. Everyone's moved across to Blue Sky,
That's
basically.
as well.
Yeah. So Trick Weeks served as Veilguard's lead writer and had previously worked on every game in the expansion in the original Mass Effect. So Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3. As well, we also had Karen Weeks, who was an editor with credits on Mass Effect 2, 3, and Andromeda, as well as multiple Dragon Age titles. But like some of our most beloved characters like Mordin, right, and Garrus, right, so their lead writer is gone, just gone. So clearly, I don't know what happened with Dragon Age. I don't know who made the key decisions or choices or greenlit a lot of that dialogue and a lot of that cringy dialogue, but these are writers that have proven themselves before, right? And we're all human, and sometimes you can get writers that are fabulous, but write an absolute stinker, right? Because they don't have a good editor or beta reader or someone that says that's not good, you know what I mean? And they're not being checked or vetted. So I feel bad in a way, because obviously that means we've got a lot of seasoned, Bioware writers that have written good stuff in the past that obviously are not going to be working on the next Mass Effect.
No.
I mean, I can't imagine like Morden and Garrus's and Tally as well. I think Tally's leader. I mean, that's just mind-boggling to me, because they're some of my favorite characters in Mass Effect.
Yeah, and quality written as well. So that's why.
Yeah. A couple of other names that we found out about: Ryan Cormier, an editor who worked on Star Wars: The Old Republic, Anthem, and Veilguard; Jennifer Chevrolet, a longtime Bioware veteran who served as tester and analyst and producer on Mass Effect 3, Dragon Age Inquisition, Anthem, and Veilguard. Lots of them. Daniel Stead, a producer who worked on Star Wars: The Old Republic. Lena Anderson, a senior product manager. Michelle Flam, a systems designer. Mad B, a UX designer. So quite a lot of people. I think Jason Schreier did. Cheryl, there are a couple that haven't all been laid off. So for example, Cheryl Chi, who was the senior writer for Dragon Age The Veilguard, she's now been moved to Motive to work on an Iron Man game, apparently.
Oh, right.
And John Epler, who was the creative director of Dragon Age The Veilguard, has been transferred to work on Full Circle's upcoming skateboarding game, Skate. Can you imagine if you are like a creative director or a lead writer for a fantasy RPG series, right? That is where your passion is. That is where your skills are. And you're put into a game like Skate or Battlefield.
Bit of a contrast.
I mean,
contrast.
you're in work, so it's better than being unemployed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that's got to feel like a punishment, hasn't it? It's got to. And John Epler is like a really seasoned Bioware veteran. He's been at Bioware for years. I think since the early days of Bioware. So he's been there quite a while. But Jason Schreier, doing what he does as always at Bloomberg, basically confirmed that about 24 people have been laid off at Bioware, and that the studio now has gone from being a studio about 200 people, which it was about 2 years ago, to less than 100 people. Yeah, and apparently a lot of these people that got moved on to other positions within EA thought that the move was going to be temporary and that they were going to be able to move back to BioWare. Obviously, when Mass Effect spins up for full development, turns out that these moves are actually permanent.
Yeah, that's extra concerning because then who are they bringing in to?
Yeah, new talent. Yeah. So it's just kind of bleeding talent, and it's bleeding really experienced talent. You know what I mean? Like people leaving, really experienced veterans leaving. So we found out that obviously about BioWare's layoffs and what's going on. Like, what's your thoughts on this, Dante? Like when you read about this and heard about all of this.
I'm getting concerned again about the higher ups' decisions. They're just.
Yeah.
It's like they're not on the ground properly in the way that it's like they know how to handle staff correctly. I think it's a bit concerning again for the future. It's like, oh, okay, we've been shifting onto other projects while waiting for Mass Effect, but then if they're not going back to it, what are they sourcing in? Like they've done layoffs, so they're then just going to get new people in again, or
I don't know. It's a real problem with BioWare. Like over the last 5 years or so, they've had such an exodus of talent and experienced, seasoned talent. The BioWare that is there are still some people that were there that have been there since the beginning, but they're a rare dying breed. They are going extinct, one by one. But you've had, I think I watched like a video on Veilguard. It was really good, and at the end of it they showed like where they did this interview with BioWare in very early days when they were first talking about Dreadwolf. And they interviewed some of the developers, and they were talking about their love of Dragon Age and how they were excited for the next series. And it was really poignant because at the end of it, they had these people that were talking about like left at this date, laid off on this date, left at this date. And you're just thinking, barely any of them were still left even before Veilguard had released. And so you're thinking, what the hell has been going on like at BioWare? Like
I think it's because they were getting told, oh, we're going to make this a live service game, and everyone that loved BioWare that loved Dragon Age were like, well, no, you're going to ruin it. I'm out. And that kind of stuff is seriously, the management don't know what the hell they're doing. They're just ruining their own companies.
Well, it's one of the reasons that Mike Laidlaw left, because he was creative director, I think, or senior director on Dragon Age. He's worked on Origins, Dragon Age 2, Inquisition, and 2 years ago or before, when they were told that it had to be a live service game, he basically left in 2022, I think it was. And that was one of his major reasons for leaving. He's actually commented recently on something else I'll talk about in a minute. But it was one of the reasons. And so when obviously the core of Veilguard as well, it's had such a tumultuous like development cycle. Like it started off as Project Joplin, which is a purely single player story driven RPG, which is what it should have been from the beginning. And then I think it got then moved into like a live service game, right? That it was going to become a live service title at that time. And then I think at that point there was a lot of just a mass exodus of people. It's kind of what happened to like Arcane Austin, when people were working on Redfall and there was a mass exodus of of talent at Arcane Austin because they didn't want to work on it. They did not want to work on a live service game. That wasn't why they joined that studio, you know. And it's the same with Bioware. People join that studio because they love RPGs. They love single player RPGs. They love narrative, choice driven RPGs. And as soon as it was being pivoted towards a live service game, there was a massive exodus of talent and big people leaving, like Mark Darrah leaving, right? And Casey Hudson leaving to spin up his own studio, you know, which sadly got closed down recently due to lack of funding. But like, just a mass exodus of people. And then obviously there was a huge, you know, layoffs at the end of 2023. And so even then things were looking rocky for BioWare. Then obviously after the absolute flop that was Anthem, they obviously changed their tune, did EA, and said, okay, single player, you know, RPG. But by then the damage had already been done. The damage had already been done. And you can see the bones of that live service game in Veilguard, but not just the damage in terms of the game, but the damage in terms of the studio. You know, the exodus of people that were like, well, that's not what I want to make. That's not what I'm in for. I'm an experienced, talented writer or producer or programmer. I'm going to go elsewhere and work on something I actually am passionate about, right? Or I'm going to spin up my own studio or something like that. So
they've only got limited options because the development time is so long on these things. It's like, right, what do I do in this position? Do I just see it through?
Yeah. And then recently there's just an absolute frigging facepalm moment because obviously you guys probably already know about this, I'm sure, but on the 4th of February, Andrew Wilson again just put his foot in his mouth. Like, he just is an idiot. He's so disconnected from what gamers actually want. He's so removed from the gaming community. And
Remind us who that fellow is?
Andrew Wilson is the CEO of EA. He's the big guy. He's the guy making the big decisions. It will have come from him, this push to live service and all that sort of thing. He's obviously only bothered about money. That line must go up. That line must go up. He's only bothered about that. But he actually kind of, in an investor's call, actually laid down his reasons for why he thought that Veilguard failed, that it didn't hit the numbers and targets that it should have done. And this is what he had to say, which is just an absolute facepalm moment. So in order to break out beyond the core audience, games need to directly connect to the evolving demands of players who increasingly seek shared world features and deeper engagement alongside high quality narratives in this beloved category. Dragon Age had a high-quality launch and was well reviewed by critics and those who played. However, it did not resonate with a broad enough audience in this highly competitive market.
Wazzock.
What an idiot. So he's basically saying that he effectively thinks it didn't succeed because it wasn't a live service game, which is just absolutely phenomenal, like just absolutely shocking, like that you could think that. Like no one would think that. No one that was a gamer or was connected to the Dragon Age franchise would think that. I think there were a couple of responses from some big ex-BioWare veterans that kind of weighed in on it, and they're brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant. So former Dragon Age creative director Mike Laidlaw, who worked obviously on Origins 2 and Inquisition, he had this to say. Look, I'm not a fancy CEO guy, but if someone said to me, the key to this successful single-player IP success is to make it a purely multiplayer game. No, not a spin-off. Fundamentally change the DNA of what people loved about the core game. To me, I'd probably quit that job or something, which is very ironic because Laidlaw was set to serve as director on what would become Dragon Age the Veilguard up until its live service pivot. And it was at this point that he actually indeed quit BioWare after working there for 15 years to set up his own studio. And then he went on to say, just thinking out loud, of course, who'd be silly enough to demand something like that twice? which is hilarious. And then David Gator, who, of course, was a Bioware veteran and served as the lead writer on Dragon Age up until Veilguard, so Origins 2 and Inquisition. He said, if I really dig into my empathy, I can kind of see the thinking here. Like, let's say you don't actually know much about games. You're in a big office with a bunch of other execs who also don't know much about games. What are they all saying? Live games do big numbers. Action games are hot. My advice to EA, not that they... hold on. Oh, jeez. Not that they care. You have an IP that a lot of people love deeply. At its height, it sold well enough to make you happy, right? Look at what it did best at the point where it was sold the most. Follow Baldur's Gate 3's studio, Larian's lead, and double down on that. The audience is still there and waiting, which is 100% right.
Yeah.
Like to say that Dragon Age didn't sell well because it wasn't a live service game, because it was a single player RPG, is completely ridiculous. When you look at the
missed the point entirely,
but when you look at other Dragon Age titles and the numbers that they've done, they've done pretty well. They're actually sold more than Mass Effect, right? And many consider that the flagship, kind of thing for Bioware now, especially with the Legendary Edition. But like Dragon Age has always performed better than Mass Effect. I mean, God, like Inquisition sold 12 million units. Like, what are you wanting? Like, and it's just ridiculous. I mean,
I know.
The reason it failed is, one, its marketing was absolutely awful, and apparently that was done by that marketing was not done by BioWare. The rumor apparently is that it was done by an actual, like, an EA marketing team that had no idea what they were doing or what they were marketing. And BioWare were furious at that initial trailer. Basically, that hurt them. That one trailer hurt them because so many, like, seasoned Dragon Age players that would have turned up for another Dragon Age were like, this isn't Dragon Age. This is not what I want. This is not the direction I want the series to go in. Why, if none of my choices matter from the previous games, when they have in every previous game up until that point, and the aesthetics and the world design and everything, just everything, like, it just, no. Just, yeah.
And you could tell it, like, that first initial trailer and the core mechanics in Veilguard, like, they've been tainted by that massively the online kind of live service crap.
You can see it.
We don't want a Dragon Age Destiny. We don't want a Dragon Age Fortnite. We want a Dragon Age game.
Yeah, we don't want a looter shooter.
And once again, it's just a guy in the office looking at the numbers going, oh, well, they're doing so well doing that. Everybody wants this, so let's make that game. It's like, no.
That's exactly it. Because it clearly shows you that they don't understand the nuance of genres and the gaming community. Certainly, there are people that will play like FIFA or FC24 or Madden and will put 1,000 hours into that game. But it's not because it's a live service game. It's because of the IP. It's because of the game. They might be a huge football fan, right? They might have mates that play that game and they meet up regularly, like every week or so, to play it with their friends, right? It might be the only game they play, which is often the case with a lot of sports games, right? They just put hours and hours and hours into that. But single player games are not that. They're not meant to be that. You're meant to enjoy it, for 50, 60 hours, maybe 100 hours, if it's like a Metaphor Fantasio, and then move on to the next game. You might come back to it, though, if it's like a choice-based RPG. Like, I know people that have put thousands of hours into Dragon Age Origins. Thousands. Because they've replayed that game so many times and they've picked different backgrounds, different origins, different choices, or they just want to play it for comfort because it's a series that they really love and they love the story and they love the characters. Like, I don't get it. It's just ridiculous.
And no microtransactions required.
No, exactly. So it does worry me. Like I like the fact that it's a smaller, focused, tight-knit group for the next Mass Effect. I think that's what is needed. I think that is what is needed. Like, they need focus, they need direction, they need to very clearly know what that game is, what they are making, and they need that creative vision that everybody understands and are working towards. And the fact that it is being like helmed by like Bioware veterans that have many of which have been there from the beginning is good, right? Because it's an experienced leadership that know what they're doing, hopefully. But I do feel bad for the people that have been laid off. And then obviously once it does spin up for full production, I wonder then, like, you know, I mean, you can make a big game on a team of just 100. And maybe that's what they need. Maybe BioWare grew too big.
Perhaps.
Maybe that's what you need to have more focus, because BioWare notoriously, and we blame EA for a lot of stuff, right, don't we? But at the end of the day, BioWare's got to take some responsibility now. They've had 4 games that have been disappointments, right? Veilguard was not the BioWare that we know. It was shocking, was the quality of writing in that game. And yeah, it just wasn't, it just didn't feel like BioWare. It just didn't feel like Dragon Age. The whole time I played it, it just did not feel like it. So, yeah.
I suppose because we're not completely in the know about how much sway they have compared to what they're getting told to make.
Yeah.
Or what properties they got. Like, if, for example, if it is the higher ups, if they could just stop thinking about making money, they would make more money.
Exactly.
Because then the quality would be good and what the players want.
Just focus on what the players want. Just double down on what you're good at.
And that will instantly
How
get
hard
round
is that to understand?
Like, oh, yeah, it's
like,
it's because they're focusing
mind-boggling.
on the numbers and the
line must go up.
backers, all that rubbish.
Yeah, it's just mind-boggling to me. It really is. You know, but like it just sometimes it can be good, because Bioware, you started off as a studio with less than 100 people, and they made some incredible games. You know, in Dragon Age Origins and Baldur's Gate and Jade Empire and Knights of the Old Republic and all that kind of thing. So maybe that will give them the focus that they need. You know what I mean? Maybe that's what that will do. It'll give them the focus that they actually will need. So to go into it. But yeah, I don't know. The smaller team that you have, I'm going to imagine the smaller scale that your game can be, right?
Or they're putting a lot of pressure on particular people with particular skill sets.
Exactly. So I'm going to imagine at some point they're going to have to start recruiting once it goes into full production.
Yeah, you'd be more focused and sharing the same ideas and not getting too left field, at least, I guess.
You don't want too many ideas. You know, you want ideas when you're iterating, of course, but you want to have some kind of. You need to be, and the problem that Bioware have had is
direction.
like look at Anthem, like or even Mass Effect Andromeda. Like there were like what 5-6 years spent in development on that game, but the game was actually made in 18 months. What were you doing for all that time? You know, in iteration, in pre-production. Like you just wonder. You know what I mean? You really do. So
probably like CD Projekt over Cyberpunk, who are just constantly changing the goalposts, going, "No, we want it to be this kind of game. No, we want to do this."
Well, that happened. That happened with Dragon Age Veilguard, and I'm not gonna lie. Like Andrew Wilson's, if I was working at BioWare and I was reading about Andrew Wilson's comments, I'd be worried. I'd be very worried. I'd be thinking, what the hell's going on? Like, what kind of game are we working on? Is the next Mass Effect? Yeah. It better be a bloody single-player RPG. It better go back down to their roots and focus on a good story and good characters. If Mass Effect becomes a live service game, Mass Effect is dead and BioWare is dead. 100%. You know?
Yeah.
So, like, yeah.
The only semi-compromise they could do is maybe like with ME3 and do like a separate multiplayer.
That's fine. I mean, I have no problem with having a separate multiplayer for the game. Don't wreck the single player for it, though. Like what they did with Anthem, right? They ruined the single player and what that game could have been because they had to have this multiplayer dynamic to it, right? And the shared world state, which is just you can't do it in an RPG. You just can't do it in an RPG. I mean, if they really want to do the multiplayer, I don't think they should, because I don't think you can Maybe you can. I mean, but like Baldur's Gate had obviously multiplayer, doesn't it? It does have multiplayer, but you don't have to play it in multiplayer. But the world does react to your choices. But it works for Baldur's Gate because it's a D&D game. It's a Dungeons and Dragons game. It's built into the source, right? Whereas Mass Effect isn't that. It isn't that, you know. So you're playing a main character and you have companions that you're interacting with. I just don't think that would work for a Mass Effect in doing that way. But certainly Mass Effect 3's multiplayer was incredibly successful. So it can, despite the dodgy microtransactions and chests.
But you could happily still play it without touching those.
You could. Apparently, though, there was some guy that spent like £14,000 or something like that, or dollars, like just on those loot boxes. Apparently, I heard somewhere about it.
Got far too much money,
or just no sense. But yes, so we'll see. But I'm not gonna lie, I am very nervous about BioWare's future. But then also I feel a little cold to it because I just don't think the BioWare that's there is the BioWare that I love. It's not there. A lot of the people that I love and respected that worked on the original trilogy are not there anymore.
Yeah, it definitely seems to be a trend lately.
Yeah, like I'm actually following quite a few of them, and I'm actually like moving on to have a look at the stuff. Like Mike Laidlaw's just brought out Eternal Strands, which I've been playing, and I've been really, really enjoying it. Right, some of the lead writers like Drew Karpyshyn, he's working on that new Exodus game. I'm so interested in the lore and story for that game. I'm going to see where Mary Kirby goes. I'm going to see where like what Mike Laidlaw does next and what Mark Gamble does next, and obviously he's going to do Mass Effect. But like, I'm very interested in the people, because it's the people that make the studio. It is the people that make the studio, not the name of the studio, not the brand of the studio. It is the people. And if you don't retain your people, retain your industry knowledge, retain their experience and passion, you are failing as a company and a business, massively so, because the core of what makes the great games is the people, the experience, and they just let them go like that. I just can't understand it. I just don't get it. Like, I really don't get it, like, at all. So I just that's why I'm worried about it. I think the next Mass Effect is being handled by a good team. I trust Mike Gamble. I think he's going to do a good job, hopefully. And it's got some good writers on it. You know, Mary DeMarle, she's great. She wrote Deus Ex, Human Revolution, and Mankind Divided, and the new Guardians of the Galaxy game. She's a very good writer. And I think Mike Gamble recently tweeted that he'd just come out of a meeting or something like that and was super excited. And then he just put thanks, Mary, after it. So clearly, like, she's been putting forward some ideas or some things, and he's really like vibing or liking it or excited by it. So that has me excited, as it should be. So hopefully, this smaller focus will be good for it. But just f off, Andrew Wilson. F off out of here. Do not interfere with BioWare. Do not force them to make a live service game, you jackass. That's the reason. Sorry, I don't swear or get angry, but I will when it comes to a studio that I love, and BioWare is that studio. Do not mess with Mass Effect the way you mess with Dragon Age, because the reason Veilguard failed is because of the change in direction, because from the top they forced it to be a live service game to pivot to that.
I'm hoping with the closure of all these other live
and then to pivot back
keep happening, they've actually cracked on. Hopefully. It's just like, we went for a load of money. Oh, actually, that was a really bad idea.
I don't usually get angry at all, but man, that just came out of nowhere. Apologise, guys. I might have to beep that out. I'll bleep that out. But so just we'll see. We'll see where things go. Right, so let's move on. Now I've got that out of my system. Let's move on to the next gaming news topic. So this one is going to be PlayStation related. So we got an article or information from Sony on, I think 28th of January, that there was going to be a shake-up in the leadership at PlayStation. So obviously in May last year, Jim Ryan left, and then in May last year, Sony announced that PlayStation was actually going to be co-led by Holman Hurst and also Hideaki Nishino. That were going to be like co-CEOs. So Hurst would be in charge of like PlayStation's first-party teams and development of PlayStation IP for like media, like TV and movie and that kind of thing. Whereas Hideaki Nishino would focus more on like the hardware side of things, like console hardware, technology, accessories, PlayStation Network, and third-party relations, third-party acquisitions and stuff like that. Well, anyway, as we know, Sony's had a bit of a weird time of it. A really weird time of it over the last kind of few years. They've had some great like releases and some great games, right? Like Spider-Man 2 was fantastic. Like God of War. Yeah, Astrobot last year, Game of the Year, was fantastic. Helldivers did very, very well as a live service game. It was a great game. And then obviously God of War Ragnarok. So they've had some pretty good like releases this year, but they've also made some very, very questionable choices. And we have had a lot of failures, particularly Concord last year being the biggest example of such, it having a peak concurrent player of 700 people on Steam, and supposedly it's estimated that it sold 25,000 copies max in a week. Which is shocking, and we don't know how much that game cost to make, but the rumor is that it cost between 100 to 400 million, dollars to make. Although that's not confirmed, that's just sort of rumors. And then obviously we've had a lot of cancellations for live service games that we learned about recently. Apparently Blue Point were working on a God of War live service. Who the hell would want that? I've got no idea who would want that. Apparently that got cancelled, although Blue Point studio are known for like more their remakes and their remasters. They're very good at it. They did the Dark Souls remake. They did a fantastic job with that. The rumor is actually that they might be working on a Bloodborne remaster or remake, because apparently there's a mod out there that was DMCA'd recently that would improve the game for 60 frames per second, and it's been out there for a few years, and it's only like now that PlayStation like take that down. So that tells me something. We might hear about that in the future, which is kind of exciting. And then Bend Studio were working on a live service game. They were the studio that did Days Gone, which was incredibly underrated in my opinion. It's a very, very good game. So we've had a lot of like flops and failures and quite big, kind of huge losses of money and questionable choices and decisions made. And we knew at some point that there was going to have to be some kind of consequence to that. And it's very rare that happens at the top, but it seems like that is what's happening, because we just got an announcement on the 28th of January that Herman Holst would be stepping down as joint CEO, effective from the 1st of April, and that Hideaki Nishino will be the sole CEO in charge of PlayStation. Holman Holst is not being let go, just to clarify that. He is still going to be working on PlayStation first-party studios and games and things, but he now has to report to Nishino, so he can't green light anything until he gets obviously confirmation. So yes, it's a bit of a step down, obviously, but Herman might be like, thank fuck, I don't want to be CEO anymore. Who would want to be leading this ship? Possibly, I can see that possibly happening. So yeah, I think there was like a statement by Nishino, which I can read to you if you want me to do so, but it's just corporate speak. Thanking Holst for all his work and everything he's learned from him and blah 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 blah. So it's all corporate speak. I'm not really interested in reading it, to be fair.
Flash it up on screen, maybe.
No, I can't even be bothered. I'll put the link in the description. Go and read it, you guys, yourself if you're interested. But I'm not reading corporate speak. Let's actually delve in and talk about it. So, what are your thoughts on this decision then? Like to no longer be joint CEO?
I suppose it don't harm us none, does it?
You're not interested?
Well, no, not massively. It's more shuffling at the top again. I don't know if he's kind of getting blamed for stuff that wasn't really.
I wonder about that. I wonder about like how much impact or say he had, because obviously a lot of these live service moves happened before he only became joint CEO last year. In like June, I think last year he became joint CEO. So you know, and then bloody Concord came out in August, right? So that game would have been in development at Fireworks Studios for years. This live service push was not, I don't think, we don't know, but I don't think it was Herman Holtz's baby. I think it was Jim Ryan that made that push. And then Jim Ryan's, in my opinion, saw the writing on the wall and got out of Dodge and retired. And I feel a bit bad.
The scapegoat now.
Yeah, I feel a bit bad that Herman Holtz might be the scapegoat for everything. I mean, obviously, he's the guy at the top. Of course, he has to take responsibility for the decisions that are made. That's what happens when you're the guy at the top. Often they don't take responsibility. But you know, it's right in a way, because he will have chosen. He could have chosen to delay Concord. He could have listened to the responses that came from the beta. Maybe he should have had a more hands-on approach to it. Maybe that's why they've done it, so that rather than, because obviously as a CEO, I'm going to imagine you've got a lot of meetings to go to, a lot of paperwork, a lot of just nitty stuff that gets in the way of what you actually are passionate about and want to do, which is going to the studios, seeing what they're working on and supporting them, and obviously giving feedback on stuff, right, and quality checking stuff that's coming from those studios. Maybe that is the reason that they have decided to reshuffle like this, so that he can do that, you know, and he can have a more hands-on role going forward to actually quality vet everything. Because there's no way you can tell me that you looked at Concord in the state that it was and thought, banger, that's going to sell millions. There is no way that you would have thought that. Just even if you got hands-on with the game, right? There's no way that you would have thought that. And you know, obviously there's rumors that you know, studio had toxic positivity. Like any criticism or any critique was just downplayed. Just, you need to be able to like admit when your shit is bad, right? And just like correct it and move on. Like that is part of iteration, right? Is doing that. So that's just mind-boggling to me that they just had that kind of toxic positivity. But I wonder if part of that comes from their Bungie DNA, because a lot of the developers at Fireworks Studio come from Bungie. And Bungie has been known to have some issues with like communication with its teams. So maybe that ethos came from when they worked at Bungie, and they've just carried it on, right? That not wanting to see reality, not wanting to kind of like admit when they mess up. And that's not good, like with anything like that. So maybe that's why they've just, maybe this will be a good thing. Maybe it'll be a good thing, and maybe actually Herman can get more hands-on. I do think he's been pushing too many. There has been a certain degree of favoritism. I do think there's constant push as Horizon, you know, being the main face of PlayStation or whatever. With like, there's now a Horizon. Well, there was going to be a Horizon MMO, which I don't know if it's been cancelled. There's a Horizon multiplayer game on the works, which I'm very interested in. If it is like a Monster Hunter style game, I'm up for that. Obviously, they're going to be working on an Horizon sequel, and then obviously you most recently had the Lego game, the Horizons, you know, which was really bad, apparently, shockingly bad, apparently, which is a shame, really, that it just wasn't very good. But yeah, too much focus on Horizon. There's been too many remasters as well for my liking. I really didn't like what was coming out of Naughty Dog with The Last of Us Part 1 remastered and The Last of Us Part 2 remastered, and too much of that. Too much of that. The stupid decisions with PSN. I'm glad that they're now not making that a compulsory thing on PC, because that stops certain people in certain countries being able to even play that game on PC. So I'm liking that they're making these decisions now, and they're making better decisions, which is good. And hopefully they'll stop doubling down and focusing on live service games, because it's a trap. In the words of Agbar, it's a trap. Don't bloody go in, because it's impossible. It is impossible. It's so difficult to break in. You need that white whale of a game like Marvel Rivals or Helldivers when it came out, but it's so difficult to. And even then, it's a flash like in the pan. So it's like you get an initial spike and then things just calm down, because people will only play so many live service games.
Yeah,
they only have so much time in a day.
Way more options these days. You can only dedicate your life to certain.
To certain games, and people just don't have enough time in their day for more than one live service game. And if people have already put hours and hours and hours and hours and how God knows how much money into a franchise, they're not going to leave it to go on to something else, are they? Unless it's a free to play game and they just want to check it out. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
And especially if it's inferior as well. You've got to really go full in and make it better than what everyone else is playing.
I think that's why Marvel Rivals has done so well, because Overwatch, which was the hero looter shooter, the hero shooter that had everybody drop the ball hard.
They tanked
themselves, and that has created a gap in that part of the industry. So they're sorted on that, right? Whereas Helldivers was its own kind of, I guess it's an extraction shooter as Helldivers. So but it really works. Does Helldivers? But I think I think they've got another one. I forget the name of it, but it looks as generic as hell. So they just need to just focus on what they're good at. And I think that's the thing, because their games are costing more and more to make, particularly your single player big blockbuster games, which is what Sony's become known for. That's why they're looking at other sources of revenue, right, to bring in to stabilize the business. That's clearly what they're looking at, and that's clearly where there's push. And that's fine if you have you don't need 10 live service games. Just have 3 or 4 games that will bring in revenue for you. I mean, look at EA. They don't give a shit if they don't care if Dragon Age Veilguard tanked. They care if FC 24 tanked, because that's their cash cow, right? And on FIFA Ultimate Team and Madden, that's their cash cow. So all you need is one. Look at Fortnite. And Epic, all you need is one really, really good live service and you're sorted, for a constant revenue stream coming in. So yeah, I am hopeful that this move will actually be a positive thing for Sony, and I'm hoping that we'll see a more focused Sony in the future, because obviously they've just been too many hands in too many different pots for me. Not enough focus on the games, So we'll see what comes from him. But I actually think this move is a positive thing. I'm wondering if it was something that was forced on Herman Holston, if he's been made to step down as a consequence or punishment for his involvement with first party and obviously live service things, or if it's something that he's asked for. I'd be so curious to find out. Come on, Jason, do a deep dive.
Yeah.
Come on, somebody interview him. Just tell us what happened, dude. I'd be so interested to see the decision, why this happened.
Kate, get his contact details. Let's get him on the show.
As if. He's not going to come on this channel.
Come to the N7.
Come to the N7 channel. Can you imagine, though? But yeah, so we'll see. We'll see where things go in the future for Sony. The last thing that I want to talk about today is kind of related to the games industry. GTA6 a little bit, and the current state of the games industry. So there's been a lot of speculation that the next GTA 6 is going to cost $100. And there's been some stupid articles around sort of saying, oh, this would save the industry, and this is what needs to happen because of the current state of the games industry. A lot of people saying that $100 isn't that much, because if you look at inflation and the cost of games 20 years ago, actually, if we took inflation into account, GTA 6 nowadays, a $70 game would actually cost $120. So they're actually saying it's quite in line with inflation, and actually games are cheaper than they used to be, right? Although they forget the volume of games that we now have. I remember back in the day, you might get a couple of games that you buy in a year that are big bangers. You don't get the influx of games that we get now, and the amount of games that get thrown our way. People can't afford to pay $100 for for one game, for a AAA game, even if it is GTA 6. And I think if any game is going to do it, is going to take that leap, it's going to be Take-Two, and it's going to be GTA 6. But they're gonna do it in a craftier way. I can't see it being $100, but I could see them increasing it from $70 to $80, right, for the base standard game, and then I can see them offering like a $100 early access cosmetic boost shark card, free shark cards or whatever, as $100. I could see them doing that, and I think a lot of publishers are waiting to see what Take-Two do with GTA 6, and certainly they're waiting to see when that release date is going to happen, because they're going to get out of the way. Like, when that release date happens, there'll just be this like exodus of there'll just be a month of nothing but GTA 6. Like, just nothing comes out except GTA 6 in that month, because if you release around when GTA 6 is, your game is dead, like, easily.
It better not launch as a buggy mess then.
Well, no. To be fair, I think Take-Two are pretty good. I mean, we look at GTA 5. We look at obviously, yeah, you are right, because they've most recently done the remasters, but they're big blockbuster titles like Red Dead Redemption 2. When that released, was a technical perfection. It was smooth as anything and looked incredible. I think GTA 6 will be the same. It's going to be the most expensive game ever made, like, easily. And I think that this is a conversation that we're having all the time in the industry at the moment, with publishers saying games are getting more expensive, to make. Like Spider-Man 2 making like 300 plus million to make it. Rumors that Concord costs 400 million. I can't see that. I think those rumors are false. But game production is getting longer. Yeah, it's taking longer to make these games. Development time is taking longer, and it's costing more money. I suppose certain things like mocap and things like that are actually quite expensive. So if you're wanting your game to be like this big blockbuster, like cinematic kind of experience with lots of mocap and everything else, I can imagine like a Naughty Dog game costing a lot of money, right? And things like that. So
a lot of the new technology, of course, every staff member's wages, and some increases for the CEOs,
and then
of course.
Marketing and everything else related to it.
Licenses for soundtrack as well,
and also licenses for certain like IPs, like but licenses for the software, but also licenses for like Marvel. Like for Spider-Man, like Insomniac have probably had to throw a ton of money at Marvel for Spider-Man, for the new Wolverine. They will have had to throw a ton of money. I'm sure Ubisoft had to pay a lot of money to Disney, for Star Wars, to be able, when they created Star Wars Outlaws. So 100%, these kind of licensed franchises are going to cost you more money, of course. But also they bring the bigger name, right? I mean, there are ways that can work. I mean, look at WB and Hogwarts Legacy. I'm sure they threw a lot of money, but that game sold like 100 million copies.
Because it wasn't full of microtransactions.
You're right. Yeah, you're right. Oh, well, then you had the bloody WB fucking CEOs saying that they wanted to still double down on live services. I think they've changed their tune now, hopefully. I think he's out,
After
actually.
Suicide Squad.
Yeah,
Have to
yeah, he
Suicide
would.
Squad.
I think he's out, actually, the CEO that said that. I think he's gone. So that's a good thing. But yeah, so I mean, I was actually reading like a kind of an interesting presentation by a guy called Matthew Bell. It's called The State of Video Gaming in 2025. It's like a 200-page presentation, so you're going to need a bit of time to read through it.
Bedtime reading.
But it's not exactly bedtime reading, but it was quite interesting, definitely, to read through the presentation. And he was sort of looking at the growth of gaming, the gaming industry, and where trends and where things have gone. And he was saying, like, between 2011 and 2021, there was this massive exponential growth in the gaming industry, that it just, this line that just kept constantly going up, and the growth rate was just so quick. I think it was something like it grew like 150% in a space of a decade. And that it went from an industry that had like an annual revenue of about $80 billion to like an annual revenue of about $200 billion. And it just grew massively up to about 2021. And then he said over the last sort of 3 or 4 years, that growth has actually stagnated. So we've seen actually a dip in the number of sales, the number of players, and the number of hours that people are actually playing games. And that growth has now stopped, and it's become like just a stable line. And like anything, as you know, in the industry, there has to be growth, right? Particularly for CEOs, that line must go up, and if that line is not going up, then your investors are not happy and your stocks tank. And look at what happened with EA recently when they lost like 19%, was it, that their stocks just tanked as their investors panicked after their recent earnings call. So like he was talking about that's causing a lot of problems, and that he was saying that like because there's no growth, it's that kind of risk factor related to committing to funding a production of a game. He was saying that like I think like publishers willing to back to fund new projects, new IPs from smaller studios has dropped by like 77%. That it's really difficult to actually get your game funded, and that we're seeing a lot of these new studios that have been like created, like Casey Hudson's studio, for example, that were working on something and iterating on it, and they've had to close because they couldn't secure funding. They couldn't secure a publisher. And that's where you've got a lot of developers now that are turning to things like early access. A lot of early access games, a lot of crowdfunding going out there and things like that. If you don't have a big publisher behind you, you're gonna struggle. And then obviously you've got to meet certain deadlines and things like that. So he was talking about like that being a problem. And then he was talking about the problem that we've got is that people are spending less money and putting less time into games. And I think there's for me I think there's 3 things that have influenced that. The first is gamers are getting older, right? So you got a lot of people that are having families, that are having children, that don't have as much time in the day to game and
work full-time jobs.
Yeah, that work full-time jobs. They can't afford to spend thousands of hours in your game. They just don't have that time to do it, right? So that's one reason. I also think the younger generation coming up are not playing the types of games that you and I played when we were
games.
No, when we were growing up. They're playing, mobile games. They're playing more live service games like Fortnite, right? Like Minecraft. That's what they're playing, and
it's their fault.
Yeah,
CEOs going, oh, that's where the money is.
Yeah, and they are creating this black hole kind of phenomenon where games become black holes, particularly live service games. So what happens is maybe there's 5 in the industry that people will just play, and it just pulls people in, and they won't play other things. They won't look at other games and buy other games. So you have all of these new games that are being made, but you don't have an audience for them. Or they have to compete with these big, huge black hole games. So for me, that live service push is killing the industry.
Pretty much.
And it's killing creative innovation, and it's hurting developers, it's hurting studios that maybe don't want to do that live servicing. And even if you, and so it's easy to get funding if you're going to be a live service game, because publishers see the money that these live service games are making and think that's an easy bet, that's a safe bet, so they'll fund you if you're a live service game. But if you are something totally different, it's a lot harder to secure that funding unless you're an established studio that you know have had a big success and can use that to fund your next project, like Larian Studios, for example, that have had but they had Baldur's Gate 3 was early access, so they had a lot of funding, a lot of support from people, right, from gamers, and made that game into something incredible. And given how many copies probably Baldur's Gate 3 has sold, I bought the game twice, once on PlayStation and once on Steam. That's how much I freaking love that game and wanted to support that studio. I bought it twice, right? And now they're going to introduce crossplay, god damn it. But I bought it twice. And so like, and that'll fund their next project. Right. And so maybe that's why a lot of places agreed for Microsoft to buy them up and are letting big corporate things just buy them up, because they're thinking, well, at least we've got some guaranteed funding. But until they ditch you and they close you down. And exactly, which is obviously what happened, which is what happened with Embracer Group. I think personally, like nowadays, like pricing it at $120, it's not the same, because 25 years ago you bought a game, you got a product, you got a finished product, you got the game from start to finish. You might have had to pay for some DLC, you know, story DLC if you wanted to, but that was optional later. Now you've got games and they come with microtransactions and stores and loot boxes and battle passes and season passes and all sorts of things now. And so like, it's not the same, it's not the entry point. Like, that's ridiculous, right? Because okay, if you're going to charge more money, then you get rid of that other stuff, but they won't get rid of that other stuff, and that affects the core game design. That's the thing. So you're asking us to pay a higher entry price point, and then you're also asking us to contribute more money after the fact. This is getting to the point that it's getting ridiculous for consumers. And what is happening is consumers are actually starting to make their voices heard, and they're actually starting to go, no, I'm not going to pay $70 price point at entry. I'm going to wait for that game to come on sale, because that game will devalue, and I guarantee you within a month or two it'll be cheaper.
On some services free.
Like Dragon Age Veilguard, I think at GameStop they're selling it now for $25. You know, very, very quick. So it's like you don't really, unless you're one of those people that have to play it on day one, right? Or like you're a content creator where you have to play the games for channel content or whatever. That's the only people. Exactly. That's it. If I was not a content creator, if I was not a YouTuber, I wouldn't play games on day one. I just wouldn't. I would wait for them to come down. I'd just wait for them to come down in price, because they will do. So you get a lot of like early access seems to be the new thing. Like pay an extra £20 or $20 to gain early access to the game for 3 days, right? Or for a week. Like that is happening with and Microsoft are doing it too, even on the Game Pass. Like you're paying for the Game Pass, but if you want to play the game early, you can give them an extra like £20 to play the game early. And it's like, but sometimes it can backfire on you. Like look at what happened with Star Wars Outlaws. That massively backfired on them, because that game was not ready pre-release date. They had a day one patch that did not go out until day one. So people that played that game early access, and then word of mouth got out, people cancelled their pre-orders, or they just didn't buy it. You know what I mean? Like so that can bite you in the butt and stuff like that. But games are already being sold at like $100. Don't kid yourself. Games are already being sold at $100. Right, 70, you know, 70 is the new norm, but now you've got deluxe editions with early access and cosmetics, and people will pay for it. People will buy it. I guarantee you more people buy the deluxe editions because they don't want to miss out than they do for the normal.
FOMO.
Yeah, for the normal standard edition. It's so common now. Particularly, you know, people that just don't care or are willing to pay down on it. So I don't think that this GTA 5 is, you know, this GTA 5 is going to be $100 thing is not news for me. Like, because we're already there. Like, just in a different way. But I do think it could be potential that they'll increase it to $80. I can see Take-Two doing that. And I can see people paying for it, but I just think that's a silly mistake. Like if they do.
Their deluxe edition is probably going to be like $300. I'll just put loads of random crap in.
But I actually think increasing prices of games, it won't help the industry. It will actually hurt the industry. That's what I think, because people will look at that as a value proposition then at an increased price, and they'll say, right, is that game worth that price? No, it's not. I'm not getting it.
Yeah.
Right.
Can I guarantee you that I'm going to enjoy it?
Can I guarantee you that I'm going to enjoy that it's going to provide value for money? Like, I wouldn't have problem paying $80, $60, £70 for Baldur's Gate 3. Because I know that game is well worth that money, right? I wouldn't have a problem with that. Exactly. So it's on a case-by-case situation, obviously. But I do think if they increase prices, that people will play less games. Because
they'll get on with their backlogs.
Yeah, exactly. People will just focus on their backlogs because you only have so much time. You only have so much money. People's, like, you know, inflation is a real thing. Things are costing more money. People have less money. The only way to save the industry is not to charge players more money. It is to look at how you are making your games. Your problem is your development cycle. Your problem is that you are making bigger and bigger and bigger games, and you don't need to. Games have become too bloated. AAA games especially have become too bloated, too big, trying to please everyone, trying to appeal to a mass market. Stop doing that. Just focus and double down, create a focused experience, charge it at a reasonable price, and players will come to your game. Like, the problem is not players paying more. Like, that's not going to make a difference. Your budgets are still going to go up, in my opinion, and your CEOs is your problem. That line always must go up is the problem.
If you trickle some of that money down to, then you're solving your problems.
Absolutely.
They don't need that much money.
Absolutely. The problem is the industry at the moment. It is toxic. It is toxic and it is greedy because it's grown to such an extent that there is so much money in games, but that money is not being used. Being used well. It's not being put back into the industry. It's being used to pay CEOs absolutely astronomical bloody salaries while they lay off staff if a game doesn't perform to their standard. Not that they know what their standard is, because they don't know anything about games anyway, and they have no interest in games. All they care about is numbers and figures. The wrong people are in the senior leadership position for these companies.
Calling the shots, The
wrong people are in those positions calling the shot, which happens in every industry, in my opinion. But yeah, I think that's the problem. I really do think that's the problem. And I think Western game development has a real problem. Look at Japan. Japan is having a renaissance of game development right now, and they are producing banger after banger. Look at what, From Software, Capcom, Nintendo, right? Like Atlas. Like, look at how good those studios are. Right. Look at Astro. They're just doing their thing. They're focusing on the games for the gamer. They're focusing on the experience of those games. And those games are selling gangbusters, and they are making the money back. And their senior CEOs and management retain their staff. They don't lay them off. All these layoffs are happening in the West. Apart from when they were owned by Western companies and laid off Japanese studios, right? But like any management in the East, in Japan, they're not laying off their studios, they're retaining them. The actual CEOs would rather take a pay cut than lay off talent. And that is the way to do it.
Yeah, and various Japanese laws or not, they are
They won't let
forced
them. Yeah.
to work correctly. They
Yeah.
don't cut corners. They don't bleed money here and there.
Exactly.
They're forced to do it like, yeah, just knuckle down and like do it
Yeah.
correctly. Look
Yeah.
at ways of working better.
Yeah. Just look at ways of working. Treat your workers better. Like
Mm.
treat your customers better.
Yeah.
Like treat them with respect. Like we're not just cash cows for you. like honestly, well, it's like customer service and consumer satisfaction and all that sort of thing. It's like that's going out the bloody window for some studios. But yeah, so those are just our thoughts. Obviously, this is quite a big chunky Normandy News Feed this week. We've ranted a bit, we've talked a bit, we've shared our thoughts on the news. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to the conversation anyway, or watching us chat and rant anyway. Let us know what you guys think about these topics in the comments section below. Share your thoughts with us. Let us know what your thoughts are. We'll be back again in 2 weeks' time with more gaming news coverage. God, I hope for some good news. That would be lovely. It's all bad. It'd be nice to have some good news. Please. Give us some good news. So we'll be back again in 2 weeks' time. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoy these videos. Take care, everybody. And as always, happy gaming. We should go.
Johnny!